So imagine for a second that you are um, navigating your way through this incredibly dense, completely unfamiliar forest.
Okay, setting a scene, I like it.
Right. And you've got this compass in your hand. And for your entire life, this compass has been, your most reliable tool.
Right. True north is just true north.
Exactly. You never had to second guess it. But lately, every time you look down, the needle is just spinning wildly.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you start walking in circles, you trip over roots, and you begin to genuinely believe that you have just, well, lost your mind.
Which is a terrifying feeling.
It is. You start thinking you've fundamentally forgotten how to walk, how to navigate, how to trust your own 2 feet.
Yeah, you feel totally broken.
Completely. You are entirely convinced that your internal sense of direction is just permanently broken. But then one day you happen to look over your shoulder
Okay.
and you realize something just horrifying. There's someone standing right behind you, intentionally holding a massive magnet to your compass.
Wow. That is such a deeply unsettling visual. But it captures the exact mechanics of what we are looking at today. Because the tragedy there isn't just that you are lost in the woods.
Right. That's bad enough, but
The real tragedy is that your disorientation, your profound belief in your own incompetence, that was completely manufactured by someone else.
and that manufactured disorientation is exactly what we are unpacking in our deep dive today.
It's a heavy one.
It really is. Our mission today is to distill a massive wealth of psychological insights. We have this comprehensive guide to recovering from gaslighting, and we're looking at therapeutic guidelines, recovery strategies.
We're pulling from a lot of solid sources.
Yeah, clinical texts and resources from places like Charlie Health, Apollo 247, Psychology Today, and we've got specific insights from trauma-informed therapists as well.
So we have this towering stack of resources.
Exactly. And our goal is to figure out not just what gaslighting does to a person's brain, because that's bad enough, but how you actually survive it. How do you dismantle that damage and rebuild?
Right. And to lay the groundwork for that kind of deep recovery, we first need to look at how the clinical texts actually define gaslighting.
Because it's a term that gets thrown around casually a lot right now.
Oh, constantly. In pop culture, on social media, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the sources define it unequivocally as a severe form of emotional and psychological abuse.
Severe abuse. Okay.
Yeah. It is the act of someone repeatedly making you question your reality. Systemically chipping away at your perceptions until you doubt your own mind.
Wow.
I want to be really clear here, though. It is not just someone lying to you about, where they were on a Friday night.
Right, because a lie is just a deception about an external fact, right? Gaslighting seems much more invasive.
Exactly. It is an invasion of your internal processing. It's this sustained campaign to literally overwrite your reality with theirs.
That is so dark.
It is. If a lie is someone hiding the truth, gaslighting is someone convincing you that your actual definition of the truth is fundamentally flawed.
And what really struck me reading through all these different therapeutic perspectives, the Charlie Health guidelines, the trauma resources, is that the ultimate goal of recovery is almost counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, you'd think recovery is just getting away from the person holding the magnet, right? You pack your bags, you leave the woods, and boom, you are cured.
Right, the geographic cure.
Exactly. But according to the text, physical distance is just the prerequisite. The true thematic foundation of recovery, the actual heavy lifting, is relearning to trust yourself.
Which is the hardest part? Because the ultimate casualty of gaslighting isn't the relationship itself. The relationship was just the weapon.
Wow, the relationship was the weapon.
Yeah. The casualty is the victim's relationship with their own mind.
Hmm.
You have to rebuild your memories, your feelings, your judgment, all of which the manipulation actively tried to erase.
Right.
So recovery, fundamentally, is an act of internal reconstruction.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well,
Because the sources lay out a very specific roadmap for that reconstruction, and they insist on a very specific starting line.
yeah, they call it step zero.
Right, step 0. Which implies it has to happen before any of the conventional therapeutic work even begins.
Exactly.
The texts universally emphasize that healing starts by explicitly naming the abuse. The listener, you have to reach a point where you can look in the mirror and declare, my reality was manipulated.
And maybe more importantly, I was not too sensitive.
Yes. But I have to ask, why call it step 0? Why isn't this just step 1? Admitting you have a problem is like the classic step 1 in almost any recovery model, isn't it?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the specific psychology of gaslighting forces a change in that standard model. Charlie Health and Apollo 247 explicitly label this step 0, because you cannot fix a problem if you are actively misdiagnosing the cause.
Misdiagnosing how? What do you mean?
So gaslighting is uniquely insidious because the victim is tricked into thinking they are the problem.
Oh, right.
The abuser has spent months, maybe years, convincing you that you are crazy or forgetful or hypersensitive.
You're dramatic.
Exactly. Dramatic. So if you go into a recovery program still harboring the belief that you are the root issue, you're going to spend years trying to fix your own sensitivity.
You'll be treating the wrong disease.
Exactly. You'll buy books on how to improve your memory or how to communicate better, Naming the manipulation, saying out loud, "I was gaslighted," shifts the locus of the problem.
It moves the origin point of the distress from your internal flaws to an external attack.
Yes. It clears the table so that step 1 can actually exist.
I really want to lean into how difficult that shift actually is for someone in the thick of it, because it's not just a matter of changing a label. Let's think about it like being trapped in a funhouse mirror maze.
Okay, I can picture that.
You walk into this room, and every reflection you see of yourself is distorted. In one mirror, your head looks massive. In another, your legs are tiny.
Your features are just entirely disproportionate.
Right. Now, imagine you live in that maze, and the person standing next to you, the person you completely trust, keeps pointing at the mirrors and saying, "Wow, you really look like that. You are really that distorted."
Oh, that is insidious.
Yeah. If you spend enough time in there, eventually your brain just accepts the distortion as reality. So stepping out of that maze and admitting, wait, the mirrors were warped, requires you to admit something devastating.
That the person standing next to you is lying the whole time.
Exactly. Which brings up a hurdle I see a lot of people face in the reading. Why is it so incredibly hard for victims to just say, "I was abused"? Why do they almost instinctively default to softer language?
Like what kind of language?
Like saying, well, we just had really bad communication issues, or they just have a strong, difficult personality.
Yeah. The hesitation there really comes down to the sheer weight of the word abuse. It carries a tremendous amount of stigma, obviously, but more importantly, it carries finality.
Finality. Okay, say more about that.
Well, if a victim admits they are experiencing communication issues, there is still a shared responsibility. It implies a sense of agency. The victim can tell themselves, if I just communicated better, if I just found the right words.
This relationship could be salvaged?
Precisely. It gives the victim a false sense of control over the chaos.
It's a survival mechanism. Like, if it's my fault, I have the power to fix it.
Exactly. But to admit you were psychologically abused means accepting that the person you trusted, perhaps someone you loved deeply, intentionally harmed you.
Yeah, that's heavy.
It forces what psychologists call cognitive dissonance.
Okay, let's make sure we ground that term for everyone. Cognitive dissonance. That's the mental friction, right? Like that almost physical brain pain you get when your lived reality completely clashes with a deeply held belief.
That's a great way to put it.
Like knowing the stove is hot, but believing your partner would never push your hand onto it.
Yes. You hold two conflicting beliefs. This person loves me, and this person is intentionally destroying my sanity.
And the brain just short circuits.
It cannot hold both of those truths simultaneously without immense distress. So to resolve the friction, the brain often chooses the path of least resistance. They love me, so my sanity must actually be broken.
Wow.
The text points out that systemic reality manipulation is not a simple disagreement. A disagreement of people having different opinions on whether a movie was good.
Right.
Gaslighting is someone telling you that you never went to the movie at all, that you made the entire evening up, and that you are losing your grip on reality for thinking otherwise. Naming it as abuse is the only way to shatter that dissonance.
That is such a vital distinction between conflict and manipulation. And I want to pause right here and speak directly to you, the listener. I want you to really reflect on some of the past conflicts you've had that left you feeling completely untethered.
The ones where you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wondering if you are losing your mind, are you able to recognize the difference between a standard, messy human disagreement where voices got raised and an interaction where your fundamental grip on reality was being systemically dismantled?
It's a hard question to ask yourself.
It is. But as the sources make crystal clear, your recovery truly, functionally begins the very second you can look at that situation and say, I was systematically made to doubt myself.
And the transition that happens once you cross that threshold is profound. Once you finally name the ghost, once you complete step 0, you are no longer fighting the wrong disease.
Right. But you are left with a new, daunting reality.
Yeah, you are essentially standing in the rubble of your own perception. You've acknowledged the compass was tampered with, you've identified the magnet.
But your needle is still spinning.
Exactly. You still don't know which way is north. So the next phase, which is heavily detailed in the guides from Health Guide and Healthline, is the painstaking process of reconstructing what is actually real in the external world.
Re-anchoring your external reality. And the very first practical instruction these clinical sources give is incredibly straightforward. It's almost administrative.
Write things down.
Write things down immediately. Record the events as soon as they happen. Write down what was said, what you felt, the exact timeline of the argument. They emphasize that you have to see the patterns in black and white to separate the truth from the abuser's distortion.
The mechanics of why this works are critical to understand, because when you are being actively gaslighted, your working memory is constantly under a barrage of attacks.
It's like it's under siege.
It is. The abuser relies on the malleability of human memory. For example, you might walk away from a tense conversation thinking they just called me incompetent and lazy. But an hour later, when you try to address it, the gaslighter says, I never said that. I said you seemed overwhelmed lately.
Why are you always putting words in my mouth?
Exactly. You always do this. And if you don't have a written record, the seed of doubt is planted. You think, wait, did they say overwhelmed? Am I being defensive?
And boom, they win.
Journaling solidifies the event in a tangible medium before the abuser has the opportunity to rewrite the script.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I look at this journaling exercise, and I realize it's not about keeping a diary of your feelings.
Not at all.
It's not a Dear Diary, I felt sad today exercise. It's more like keeping a ship's logbook when your navigation system is compromised.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. A ship's log isn't about the captain's emotions. It's a cold, hard ledger of reality. At 1400 hours, the wind was blowing east. At 1500 hours, the first mate said this exact sentence.
It becomes an indisputable anchor.
Yes. When the gaslighter tries to change the history of the voyage, you don't have to rely on your compromised memory, you have the logbook.
A ledger of reality. I think that framework takes the emotion out of it, which is exactly what a victim needs in that moment. They need objective data.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of the recovery roadmap, the sources don't just want you to keep this logbook hidden under your mattress.
No, you have to do something with it.
Every single gaslighting recovery guide we reviewed, literally every single one, stresses a major non-negotiable rule. Do not heal alone.
Do not heal alone.
They strongly advocate for seeking out what LinkedIn's professional psychology resources and various therapy networks refer to as truth givers.
Truth givers, people whose literal role in your life is to affirm your reality. But let me pose a hypothesis here, because I imagine finding a truth giver is more complicated than just calling up your best friend and complaining.
It is much more complicated.
Because if I just go to a casual friend and say, I feel crazy, my partner is driving me nuts, the friend, trying to be supportive, might just say, oh, you're not crazy, you're just stressed, we all have partner drama.
Which is a nice sentiment, sure.
Right, it's nice, but it completely fails to address the reality distortion. It doesn't fix the compass at all.
You've hit on the exact reason why the guides are very specific about how to interact with truth givers. Gaslighting thrives in isolation.
Okay, so it needs you to be alone.
The abuser's entire power structure relies on being the sole narrator of your reality. If they can cut you off from other perspectives, their distorted funhouse mirrors are the only mirrors you ever look into.
That makes total sense.
So when the guides tell you to find a truth giver, whether that's a highly trusted friend, a support group, or a therapist, they specify that you must share specific examples, not just vague feelings of insanity.
So you literally bring the ship's logbook to them.
Exactly. You don't say, I feel crazy. You look at your logbook and you say, on Tuesday at 6 p.m., they hid my car keys. They sat on the couch and watched me tear the house apart in a panic for an hour. And when I finally found the keys in their coat pocket, they looked me in the eye and told me I was losing my mind and that I put them there.
Oh, my God.
And a true truth giver can look at that specific isolated data point and provide the crucial feedback. No. That is not normal forgetfulness. That is not a communication issue. That is abusive behavior.
That external validation acts as a massive anchor for a mind that has been drifting in the ocean. It provides a baseline of sanity outside of the toxic ecosystem the abuser created.
Yes. And while friends are incredibly important, the sources heavily emphasize bringing these logbooks to professionals.
Right. Therapy.
Multiple clinical resources highlight the efficacy of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and trauma-informed approaches.
But CBT is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot. How does CBT actually dismantle a gaslit memory? What are the actual mechanics of a session?
Let's walk through it. Cognitive behavioral therapy is fundamentally about identifying cognitive distortions, the false, unhelpful narratives we tell ourselves, and dragging them into the light to challenge them with empirical evidence.
So it essentially treats the brain like a courtroom.
Exactly like a courtroom. In a gaslighting context, CBT is perfectly suited for the job because the victim has completely internalized the abuser's narrative. The victim walks into therapy believing, I am overly emotional, I am overly demanding, and I am constantly wrong.
Because that's what the magnet has been telling the compass.
Yes. So the CBT therapist doesn't just say, no, you aren't, you're great. That doesn't work. Instead, the therapist will ask you to put that belief on trial. They will ask for an evidence log. If the belief is, I am overly demanding, the therapist will say, let's list the evidence that proves this. The victim might say, well, I asked my partner to text me if they were going to be 4 hours late coming home, and they said I was suffocating them.
Wow. And then what does the therapist do?
The therapist then helps the victim analyze that evidence objectively.
Yeah.
Is asking for a text message after 4 hours objectively suffocating? Let's look at the counter evidence. What would a reasonable standard of communication look like?
It is a highly structured, rigorous way of dismantling the gaslighter's lies point by point, using logic to override the emotional manipulation.
Precisely.
Okay, that covers the cognitive side, the logic side. But what about the trauma-informed side? Because from what I understand, logic isn't always enough when your body is in a state of sheer panic.
No, it's not. The trauma-informed perspective is vital because it recognizes that gaslighting isn't just a cognitive puzzle to be solved. It is a profound assault on your physical nervous system. Living in a state where you are constantly questioning your own reality puts your body in a state of chronic, unyielding fight or flight. Your cortisol levels are just permanently spiked.
You're just constantly braced for impact.
A trauma-informed therapist understands that you cannot logic your way out of a physiological trauma response. Before you can even do the CBT courtroom exercises, they focus heavily on regulating the nervous system.
Making you feel safe in your own body first.
Exactly. They help you process the profound grief for the time you lost and the deep, terrifying anger that bubbles up once you fully realize you've been intentionally manipulated. They help calm the body so the mind can actually do the work of rebuilding.
So keeping a ledger of reality, relying on truth givers to validate your data points, working with CBT or trauma therapists, these are all incredibly powerful mechanisms to validate your external reality.
Yes.
They help you prove that the sky is still blue and that the wind is still blowing east. They prove that what happened outside of you really happened. But as the texts move forward in the recovery timeline, they make a very sobering point.
Which is?
The ultimate damage of gaslighting is internal. You can have 10 friends, a therapist, and a notebook all telling you that you aren't crazy. But if your internal compass is still fundamentally broken, you are still going to feel lost in the woods.
That's entirely true.
External validation isn't a permanent cure. We have to talk about fixing the internal machinery. We have to talk about the micropolitics of self-trust.
This transition from external to internal is truly the core of the entire recovery process. Gaslighting's primary objective is the destruction of self-trust, right? Therefore, recovery is the deliberate act of rebuilding it.
And the clinical sources, specifically Psychology Today, professional networks on LinkedIn, and deep dives from Eggshell Therapy, they break this internal reconstruction down into 3 highly specific, actionable methods.
3 very targeted methods.
Right. And those 3 methods are, number 1, keeping tiny, self-kept promises. Number 2, practicing self-validation using tools like emotion wheels. And number 3, reconnecting with the body's physical cues. Now, I am going to be honest, and I want to push back on this a little bit, because when I first read these recommendations, they felt completely disconnected from the severity of the trauma.
Really? Let's hear the pushback. What feels disconnected?
Well, we are talking about devastating, identity-shattering psychological hypnosis, someone's entire sense of reality, their entire understanding of who they are, has been dismantled by someone they loved.
Right.
And the clinical recommendation from Psychology Today is go to bed when you said you would, drink a glass of water, take a 5-minute walk.
I see where you're going.
I mean, how on earth does drinking a glass of water actually help someone recover from systemic emotional abuse? To a layman, it feels borderline insulting.
On the surface, if you just read it as a listicle, I completely understand why it sounds trivial. It sounds almost dismissive. But we have to look past the action itself and look at the neuroscience of reliability.
The neuroscience of reliability.
When you are gaslighted for an extended period, your brain learns a very specific lesson.
Mm.
You are an unreliable narrator of your own life.
You can't trust yourself.
You cannot trust your memory, you cannot trust your judgment, and you cannot trust your actions. Your internal database of self-efficacy has been entirely corrupted.
Your brain basically views you as an incompetent employee.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So if you try to rebuild self-trust by making massive sweeping declarations like, I will never let anyone treat me badly again, or I am completely taking my life back today,
Your brain just rejects it.
immediately, your brain, which currently views you as entirely incompetent, rejects that promise.
Yeah.
It's too big of a leap. You don't have the internal credit score to back up a loan that massive.
Ah, okay. I see the mechanics now. It's like rehabilitating a major muscle injury.
Exactly like that.
If you get into a terrible accident and completely tear your bicep, your physical therapist doesn't walk into the room on day one, hand you a 50-pound dumbbell and say, all right, let's fix this arm, do a curl.
No, the muscle would snap.
Right. You start with a 1-pound weight. You start with just passive range of motion. You are just trying to prove to the injured tissue that it can move at all without catastrophic failure.
Exactly. Keeping micro promises, going to bed at 10 p.m. because you told yourself you would, drinking that glass of water you promised yourself, showing up for a 5-minute walk. These are the 1-pound weights of psychological rehab.
Oh.
The water itself doesn't cure the abuse, but every single time you say you are going to do something and then you actually execute it, you are providing undeniable neurological evidence to your own brain that you are a reliable actor.
That is so powerful.
You are slowly training your brain to see you as someone whose words align with their actions. You are rebuilding your internal credit score point by point. And that foundation is absolutely necessary before you can tackle the heavier lifting of self-validation.
And that leads to the second method the texts bring up, self-validation. Eggshell therapy points out that gaslighting essentially programs an automatic negative response in your brain.
Yeah, a default script.
Right. Your default reaction to your own feelings becomes, I'm overreacting, or I must be remembering it wrong. Recovery means deliberately pausing and forcing a new script. But they suggest using tools like emotion wheels.
Which are incredible tools.
But for those who haven't encountered one in therapy, can you explain what an emotion wheel is and why a trauma victim needs a visual aid just to know how they feel?
It's a vital tool because trauma often causes what we call an amygdala hijack, where the language centers of the brain essentially go offline.
So they literally can't find the words.
Right. A gaslit person feels a rush of distress, but they are frozen. If you ask them how they feel, they might just say bad.
Or they just cry.
Yeah. An emotion wheel is a visual circle. In the very center, you have core basic emotions: mad, sad, glad, scared. But a victim looks at mad, and their conditioning kicks in. I'm not allowed to be mad, I'm overreacting.
So what do they do?
So the wheel helps them move to the outer rings, which contain more nuanced, specific language. They trace mad out to frustrated, and then further out to dismissed or undervalued.
Providing that specific vocabulary helps the victim bypass the mental block.
Yes. It allows them to say, I am feeling undervalued. And once they name it, they can validate it. It makes sense that I feel undervalued because my perspective was just ignored. It turns a chaotic feeling into valid data.
And this leads directly into the third and perhaps most profound method, reconnecting with the physical body. Trauma-informed therapists note that gaslighting fundamentally severs the connection between the mind and the gut.
It creates a massive disconnect.
Because your mind is constantly being told it is defective and wrong, you eventually stop trusting your bodily intuition entirely. You start treating your own physical reactions as glitches in the system.
The abuser has conditioned the victim to view their own physical anxiety as empirical evidence of their craziness, rather than what it actually is, an incredibly highly evolved ancient warning system.
Right.
Healing involves somatic practices, grounding exercises, mindfulness, body scans. But I want to clarify a massive misconception here. The goal of these breathing exercises is not just to relax or calm down.
Right, it's not a spa day. It's tactical.
Highly tactical. The goal is to start noticing those physical cues, the sudden tight chest, the knot in the stomach, the shallow breathing, as legitimate empirical signals from your nervous system.
Instead of defaulting to the abuser's script of, oh, I'm just being dramatic.
Exactly. The listener must learn to pause, observe the physical sensation, and ask, what is my body trying to tell me right now? What boundary is being tested?
It's about treating your physical sensations as raw, unbiased data, not as moral judgments about your sanity, but as data points on a dashboard.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
So for you listening right now, I want to give you a very practical application you can try today, maybe even in the next few hours.
I love this.
The next time you are in a conversation and you feel that sudden spike of anxiety, that flutter in your stomach or that tightness in your throat, I want you to do one mindful check-in. You don't have to confront anyone.
You don't have to win an argument.
Exactly. Just pause internally. Notice the physical sensation. And deliberately, consciously replace the automatic thought of, I'm crazy, with a new thought. My feelings are valid data.
Just acknowledge the data.
Consider it a 1-pound weight for your self-trust.
And here is the beautiful, inevitable consequence of rebuilding that internal self-trust. Once you start paying attention to your internal dashboard again, once you accept that your stomach knot is valid data, you will inevitably realize why those alarms are going off.
Why are they going off?
They're usually firing because someone in your external environment is crossing a line. Your body is telling you that a violation is occurring. Therefore, self-trust inherently demands the creation of boundaries.
You cannot trust yourself and simultaneously allow people to walk all over you.
No, you can't.
Which brings us to the architecture of boundaries. And I love how the texts from Charlie Health, Apollo 247, and Palm Coast frame this. They don't just describe boundaries as rules or as punishments for bad behavior. They describe them as medicine.
Medicine, yes.
Gaslighting blurs all the lines of a relationship. It makes you feel responsible for the abuser's emotional regulation, and it strips you of the right to your own. Recovery is the deliberate act of redrawing those lines on the map.
The sources categorize these into 3 distinct types of boundaries: emotional, communication, and relational.
Okay, let's break those down.
An emotional boundary is an internal realization. It's telling yourself, I am not responsible for fixing your bad mood, and your anger does not dictate my reality.
Wow, okay, and communication.
A communication boundary is setting explicit rules for engagement, like, if you yell at me or if you deny my reality, I am stepping out of this conversation.
And relational.
Relational boundaries are the macro-level limits, deciding to limit contact or completely ending contact with people who refuse to respect the first 2 boundaries.
So what does this all mean for you practically? Because I think a lot of people misunderstand what a boundary actually is. People often conceptualize boundaries as massive, impenetrable brick walls.
Right, like a fortress.
Yeah, they think setting a boundary means locking themselves away in a dark fortress where no one can reach them. But I prefer to look at them as property lines.
Property lines, I like that.
You aren't building a fortress. You are simply putting up a very clear, visible fence that says, here is where my yard ends and yours begins. You are welcome to stand in your yard and wave at me, but you cannot hop the fence and dump your toxic waste in my garden.
It's about definition.
It's about knowing where you end and they begin.
This raises an important question, though, and it's one that causes victims a lot of anxiety. What actually happens when you try to set one of these boundaries with someone who actively gaslights you?
It's rarely a smooth conversation.
Let's look at the specific script provided by the text for a communication boundary. If you deny my reality, I'm stepping out of this conversation. We have to be brutally honest here. A gaslighter is not going to hear that and say, oh, I hear you, my apologies. I will respect your boundary.
No, absolutely not. They are going to escalate.
They will escalate dramatically. They will tell you that you are being dramatic. They might even accuse you of being abusive for walking away.
Wow.
They will use the boundary itself as further proof that you are acting crazy.
Which is terrifying. The prospect of that escalation keeps people trapped for years. So why do the clinical guides push so hard for victims to use these exact scripts if they know full well the abuser's just going to attack them for it? It seems like setting the victim up for a fight.
Because the secret of the boundary is that it isn't actually meant to change the abuser's behavior.
It's not.
No, the boundary is for you. The text states that practicing these boundaries and enforcing them reinforces the victim's fundamental right for their reality to simply exist.
Oh, I see.
When you say the script, I'm stepping out of this conversation, and you actually physically walk out of the room, you are confirming to your own brain that you have the right to protect your mental and emotional safety.
It doesn't matter what the abuser yells at your back as you walk away.
Exactly. The act of walking away is a massive deposit into your self-trust account. You are acting as your own truth giver.
You are finally becoming the reliable ally your brain has been looking for. That is incredibly empowering, and I want to challenge you, the listener, to focus on this in your own life right now.
It's a great exercise.
Think about a specific conversation you've had recently, or one you know you're dreading having soon, where you might need to use that exact script. Imagine yourself taking a breath and saying, "If you belittle my feelings, I'm ending this call."
And imagine the absolute terrifying power of actually hanging up the phone.
Yes, the fallout might be loud. Yes, it is scary. But the sheer protective force of that action is how you heal your compass.
But as we look at the broader timeline of recovery, we have to acknowledge a hard truth about boundaries. Boundaries create a safe perimeter. They stop the act of bleeding. They lock the threat out.
Right.
But what do you do with the empty space inside that perimeter once the threat is gone? Because gaslighting doesn't just confuse you. It leaves you feeling hollowed out, broken, and utterly worthless.
The abuser didn't just attack your memory, they systematically attacked your core identity to make you dependent on them.
So the next phase of recovery is reconstructing who you actually are.
Right, reconstructing identity and rebuilding self-efficacy. Because the gaslighter spent months or years telling you that your interests were stupid, your values were flawed, and your personality was inherently defective.
They isolated you from the things that made you you.
The guide suggests that recovery involves deliberately rediscovering your values and interests completely away from the abuser's influence.
Re-engaging with old hobbies you dropped.
Exploring new ones, figuring out what food you actually like to eat when someone isn't criticizing your diet. You have to literally date yourself to figure out who you are when you aren't under a hostile microscope.
It's a huge undertaking.
But as victims try to do this, there is a massive roadblock. It's a question that haunts the text, and I'm sure it haunts almost every survivor reading it. The question is, why did I stay?
Yeah.
As victims start to heal, why is intense self-blame the default setting?
It is the default setting because the victim's brain is desperately trying to assert some semblance of control over a deeply chaotic trauma.
Control again.
Think about it. If you tell yourself, I stayed because I was weak, or I didn't see the manipulation sooner because I am stupid, you are, in a very twisted, painful way, taking responsibility for the abuse.
Right, and if you are responsible for it, your brain tricks you into thinking you have the power to prevent it from happening again by just being smarter or stronger next time.
It's a defense mechanism. But therapists emphasize that this self-blame is incredibly destructive. It keeps the victim chained to the abuser's narrative that they are fundamentally flawed.
Which is exactly what the abuser wants.
Exactly. This is where the concept of profound self-compassion enters the framework.
I'm looking at this emphasis on self-compassion in the literature, and it seems like it's not just about, being nice to yourself or taking bubble baths. It seems like a very tactical tool to stop doing the abuser's job for them.
It is entirely tactical.
How does the text define self-compassion in this specific context?
It connects directly back to what we discussed in Step 0. You have to recognize that you were under active, systemic manipulation. You didn't stay because you were inherently weak. You stayed because your reality was being hacked by someone you trusted.
Hacked. Wow.
Self-compassion means looking back at your past self, the self that was trapped in the funhouse mirror maze, and saying, you did the absolute best you could with the distorted map you were given.
If you do not recognize the manipulation for the act of sabotage it was, you will forever blame yourself for not navigating the forest perfectly.
Completely ignoring the fact that someone was intentionally holding a magnet to your compass.
That completely reframes the shame. It allows you to take the heavy cloak of shame off your own shoulders and put it exactly where it belongs.
On the abuser.
Yes, on the abuser. And once you clear that self-blame, Palm Coast and other resources recommend actively building up your self-efficacy with what they call small wins.
Achieving small, realistic goals.
Completing a minor project. Learning a new, simple skill. Handling a difficult social situation just slightly differently than you would have a year ago.
Let's break down the psychological loop of these small wins, because they are the engine of identity reconstruction.
How so?
Gaslighting operates by feeding your brain a constant, uninterrupted loop of incompetence. You can't do anything right. You make terrible decisions. You need me to survive in the real world.
It's brainwashing.
It is. Every time you achieve a small win, and I mean small, like finally finishing a book you wanted to read, successfully baking a loaf of bread, or figuring out how to fix a leaky faucet on your own, you are creating empirical evidence that shatters the gaslighter's narrative.
Each win sends a massive, undeniable signal to your brain.
I am capable. I can learn. I can trust myself to act in the world and survive.
It's building the house back up, literal brick by literal brick. And honestly, looking at this whole roadmap, it is such a relief to read these sources and see that there is a clear, logical path to getting your identity back.
It is a solid roadmap.
You do step 0, you keep a logbook, you find a truth giver, you start lifting the 1-pound weights of micro-promises, you set the property line boundaries, you rack up small wins. You read it and it sounds almost like a recipe. You bake at 350 degrees for an hour and you are cured.
And here is where the clinical texts require me to step in and aggressively temper those expectations.
Uh-oh.
Which leads us to the final and perhaps most difficult realization in the recovery journey. The harsh but deeply necessary truth about the timeline of healing.
Okay, lay it on me.
The guides from Psychology Today, LinkedIn, and trauma specialists are unequivocal about this. Healing from gaslighting is a long, slow, and profoundly non-linear game. It is absolutely not a switch you can just flip once you understand the theory.
Which is incredibly frustrating. Let's be honest, we all want the Hollywood montage sequence.
We really do.
We want the cinematic experience where you do 3 tough therapy sessions, you stand up and set a dramatic boundary in the rain, the music swells, and suddenly you are completely healed, walking confidently into the sunset.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
But the text normalizes a very, very different reality.
Yeah.
It says you may experience intense back and forth doubts. You might be doing great, and then suddenly you actively miss the abuser.
Missing them, really.
Yes. You might wake up 6 months into a successful recovery and suddenly question, wait, was it really that bad? Did I make it all up? Maybe I was just overreacting.
And we have to make this incredibly clear that regression is completely normal.
Completely normal. I want to emphasize that feeling grief, feeling shame, or even feeling intense longing for the abuser is not a failure of your recovery. It does not mean you are going backward.
Why does it happen then?
When you leave a gaslighting dynamic, you aren't just losing an abuser. You are losing the entire reality they constructed for you. Even if that reality was toxic, even if it was a funhouse mirror maze, it was known. It was predictable.
Stepping out into the unknown, healthy world is terrifying.
Exactly. And your brain will sometimes crave the familiarity of the maze simply because it knew the layout. Those feelings of missing them or doubting the severity of the abuse are part of the complex process of integrating the trauma. It is your brain slowly, painfully digesting the reality of what happened to you.
I just want to pause and validate how utterly exhausting that sounds for you, the listener. You've already survived the abuse. You survived the relationship. And now you are being told that the recovery itself is going to be a slow, confusing, nonlinear slog filled with setbacks and ghosts.
It is exhausting.
But I want to reframe that exhaustion using the wisdom directly from the text. Patience, grace, and small intentional steps are the only way out of the maze. You cannot sprint through a minefield.
No, you will trip.
Exactly. If you try to rush your healing, you will trip.
Mm.
You have to take it one careful, deliberate step at a time, and you have to aggressively celebrate the micro-victories.
We have to redefine what victory looks like. A micro-victory isn't being perfectly healed. A micro-victory is noticing the manipulation a few minutes earlier than you used to.
Oh, that's good.
A micro-victory is trusting your gut instinct just once, even if you spend the next day doubting it. A micro-victory is saying no to someone and realizing an hour later that you didn't instinctively apologize for having a boundary.
Psychology Today reminds us that rebuilding an entire internal infrastructure takes time. You are unlearning years of intense, deliberate conditioning. You have to give your brain the grace to adapt.
Yes. As we synthesize the core message of all these different clinical guides, all these trauma perspectives and therapeutic insights, the text actually leaves us with a concept they call the one line to carry with you.
And I think it encapsulates everything we've talked about perfectly.
What is it?
The realization that your mind is not the enemy.
That is the ultimate paradigm shift. Gaslighting's entire architecture was designed to make you go to war with your own cognition. It tried to teach you that your brain was flawed, broken, and fundamentally untrustworthy. Recovery, ultimately, is the beautiful, painstaking process of laying down your weapons, calling off the war against yourself, and realizing that your perceptions are, in fact, worth listening to.
Your feelings are not malfunctions. They are valid signals.
And your intuition, which was banished to the basement for so long, is finally allowed back into the room to guide you.
We've covered so much ground today. We've walked through naming the ghost in step 0. We've looked at the tactical importance of keeping a logbook of reality and finding truth givers who can validate your data.
We've explored the one-pound weights of micropromises.
The necessity of treating physical anxiety as valid data, and the property lines of boundaries. We've seen how recovering from gaslighting is truly the art of relearning how to trust the very mind that was used against you.
And building purely on the source's premise that recovery is about rebuilding a reality that was destroyed, I want to leave the listener with a thought-provoking extrapolation.
Okay, I'm ready.
Think about the biological nature of a bone that has been broken. When a bone fractures and goes through the healing process, the calcification at the break site often makes that specific spot denser and stronger than it was before the injury.
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
If gaslighting is the systemic dismantling of your reality, could the ultimate triumph be that you don't just return to the naive, trusting person you were before the abuse?
Right, because you can't unknow what you now know.
Exactly. What if the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding your self-trust, brick by brick, actually results in an architecture of identity that is entirely immune to manipulation in the future?
Because you have spent so much time examining your own foundation.
Yes. Analyzing your boundaries and practicing the micropolitics of self-trust, you now know exactly how your reality is constructed. You know every beam and every nail.
Oh,
Could it be that surviving this and actively engaging in this rigorous recovery process makes your inner compass permanently unbreakable? What if the compass isn't just repaired, but becomes completely immune to magnets?
that is an incredibly powerful thought to walk away with. You aren't just healing the damage, you are upgrading the entire system to be tamper-proof. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, take care of your mental compass, trust your data, and we will see you next time.